So I've always aimed to use this in my working with people who have mental health, or meeting with people who have mental health. I have also suffered slightly with depression. Unfortunately, I had a lot of things happen in my childhood which caused flashbacks.
I'm on my way to Buckinghamshire, to the picturesque village of Tinchwick, where I will meet a remarkable young woman with a great deal to say about mental health and young people.
So I come from a small farm in Wales, and my first dealings with mental health was my brother. The way I live my life is helping people understand people that other people can't. So my brother is 4 years older than me. He's the love of my life. I love him to bits. But we've always had different challenges and different things we've faced as a family, growing up with a brother that has quite severe disabilities.
Yeah.
The other thing is about them not being physical disabilities. It can be very hard to explain to somebody why he's doing such things.
Yeah.
For example, we go to festivals, people would think he's on drugs, try to offer him them. Thankfully, he's brilliant. And one time I remember a girl went up to him and offered him a shot, and he took it and he went, "I don't drink this poison," flung it on the floor and ran off with his cloak. So he's perfectly good at not accepting things.
Okay, good.
But people not accepting him is another issue. Unfortunately, kids, things like that. He's an amazing person. He loves children. But parents obviously see somebody who's 6'7" and get worried.
Well,
Anybody would. Yeah, exactly. And so I think a big thing about the way I live my life is helping people understand people that other people can't. For example, I set aside 6 months of my life to study sign language because I understand that people who sign often are kept in a bubble where they can't communicate with the outside world.
Yeah, right.
And I remember watching a video of somebody like that and I cried because I thought, I can talk through my voice, I can talk through my very flamboyant hands.
Yeah,
and
I've noticed that.
Exactly.
The hands do a lot.
And everybody has a way of communicating, but these people have learnt their way, but other people haven't, and that's their problem. So I went out and I learned it, and one of the most amazing times I was at a festival, this guy was selling me a jumper, and it turned out he was deaf. So I signed to him, "Thank you." And he was, "You sign?" And so surprised, and that was amazing for me because all my hard work in learning to sign had come off. And I say hard work, you have to learn some hand signals, and it's such an amazing way to then communicate with somebody that it doesn't seem like much hard work, really.
Really? So, I mean, did it take you the full 6 months, or did you just enjoy it that much you kept on?
I signed up for a 2-week course.
Right, okay. And would the 2-week course have been enough?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they teach you things like, "I'm sorry," "hello," "my name," and then things that you may need in everyday life. For things like, "Oh, that's sweet," or my sign name, which is this, I think it means cutie or something, or sweetie, and it's just really fun to learn. And also, you're never done with learning sign language. Signs are being made up every day, and people are learning new and innovative ways of communicating.
I suppose it's like the spoken language.
Exactly. It's the same thing. And people who have that mind where they love the language, I wish they'd go into it because it's really interesting. Yeah. And it's not just for deaf people, it's for everybody. So anyway, after doing that, which I really enjoyed, I went on to work in a lot of youth clubs and youth help places. For example, Scouts. I worked my way up in Scouts. My brother is a chief scout, and he's now travelling the world for 10 years.
Wow.
On his scouting
Being a scout.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And he's loving every step of it. Scouts, I found, was an amazing way to deal with my mental health because I have also suffered slightly with depression. Unfortunately, I had a lot of things happen in my childhood which caused flashbacks. Right. So instead of letting those things drag me down and spending a lot of time on my own, which is the key thing I find, I have my jumper, which I don't know if people with depression understand, but my jumper, it's a big jumper I've had since I was young, and it's my safety. Okay. It keeps me safe. Okay. And I've met a lot of people who have depression who have a jumper. Yeah. And it's
be it a jumper or whatever. But
yeah, exactly. And it's their one piece of clothing that when they're in it, they feel really comfy. Yeah. And no matter what they're doing, whether they're scoffing chocolate, which I did a lot, or whether they're, I don't know, using drugs to help their problem, or anything, they have that jumper, or they have something that reminds them of keeping safe. Right. So what I did is I held on to that thing, and I made it into everything around me. my jumper makes me feel safe.
Yeah.
So I have changed my surroundings to help me feel safe.
Okay.
To help me build my self-confidence up. So I knew that living in a big city when my mental health really crashed to the point I was living in a cupboard for 2 weeks and didn't eat anything, that I managed to build myself back up by getting away from so many loud noises and things that scared me and that I didn't understand. And I've taken those now to finding things that make me feel comfortable and also remembering that I do have a boundary, because a lot of people will push themselves to the point that there's nothing left of themselves. And you've got to remember that there is a you, and you is the most important thing, because if you don't keep yourself okay, you're not going to be able to help those around you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so once I'd built myself up to a stage where I felt much happier, much better, I was feeling really good with my life, I started helping with mental health in the way of helping with the CIC in Cardiff.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. From the first week of working there, I was helping young children who had been left on the streets by their parents due to drug addiction, bad behaviour from the child.
Yeah.
And all these children blamed nobody. It's very hard to put blame on something when you don't understand what it is you're being blamed for.
Yeah.
So these kids were all angry and scared and confused because nobody had ever taken the time to say, are you okay? Are you alright? What do you need? What do you want? And a lot of times you'd get the kids come to our buildings, and instead of starting off the interview, instead of starting off getting these kids off the street and bringing them straight to a formidable building that's very scary, we take them out for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and sit down with them and say, what do you want to do in life? If you could forget about qualifications, forget about these things, and they are really scary. If you're somebody who doesn't have much confidence in your brain, having to feel that everything is a test, everything is numbers and words, and that you can't understand those, yet that means you must be stupid. And it's so hard to get yourself out of that mental cycle, and it's so hard to realise that there are many things you can do that you don't have to be academically gifted for. Helping these kids understand that they didn't need to impress anybody, they didn't need to be this perfect person to get by. They just needed to be themselves, and they needed to be happy, and they needed to be confident.
I mean, how do you begin?
It's very hard because these kids come off the streets broken, and you've got to mend them, and you've got to help them, and so you've got to start by making sure that they know that you are safe and that you are not in any way going to break their trust, because that is one thing that they have had kicked in their teeth all their life is trust.
Yeah, I can imagine.
From police, from the social services, from their parents, from their families, from people around them. They've never had somebody they can rely on. So you've got to be that person that no matter what time at night they ring you, you answer the phone, hello, how are you? What's the matter?
Yeah.
4 in the morning.
Yeah, which must be really draining for you if you haven't got in till 11 o'clock because you've been, I don't know, doing whatever you need to do.
It can be. I remember Valentine's last year was really bad. I had 3 different people ring me because they were really upset that they didn't have anybody to be with at Valentine's, and that they didn't have anybody to be there. I remember I got one call at 2 in the morning. I finished at 11. One call at 2 in the morning, one call at 4 in the morning, and then one call at 5 in the morning. And at that point I was like, sleep is futile.
Yeah.
But you've always got to be there, and it's one night of my life, but could give them many more days of their life, because if I wasn't there as a word or somebody to cry on or somebody to help them, they may not be there in the morning because they may have felt that things were too hard.
Correct. And there are those moments as well. I mean, I know when my circumstances weren't so good, and there are 1 or 2 moments where somebody was there, and they probably didn't really understand the significance, but I'll never forget it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and you never know when that moment is.
Exactly, and it's that fleeting moment. So if you, at every point and every turn, try to admit what you would want to be treated like if you were in that situation, and I don't mean give them money, give them everything. Life's not about giving or spending, it's about helping.
What you do.
Exactly. If you have a coat that's warm and you see somebody outside your door every day who doesn't, give it to them.
Yeah, give them a call.
Exactly. And I wish that people would open up their homes more. I remember in Germany they have an amazing policy. It's not even a policy, it's just a town. They open up their homes, let the homeless in and feed them till they're like bursting, And I think that's amazing. And I think that we should do that in this country, especially in cities.
But we have so much stigma in this country.
We have so much hatred toward others because we're scared of things that we don't know.
Yeah.
And yet, 100 years ago, being gay was wrong. Being divorced was wrong. Being a child from an unmarried family was wrong. All these things that we think are wrong have actually turned out to be right and saved lives. How many women were married to abusive husbands?
Indeed.
And so how many people need to be brought off the streets? And if we help now, there's no point saying, oh, it's going to be in the future, it's going to be this. We need to all help now and help with the people that are around us and stop worrying about the people on the TV like the Kardashians that we're never going to meet.
And who are trivia anyway?
Exactly. And
it's not what you've got, it's what you do.
Exactly. You are born as you are, and you may be able to change that nowadays in plastic surgery, but you won't be able to change who you are inside.
Indeed.
And I don't know, I've never had plastic surgery done, and I don't know anybody who has, but I believe that if you are going to that extent to cover yourself up, then you need to look inside yourself and get rid of the hate that you are obviously admitting to when you look in the mirror. And instead of trying to hide it and trying to become this perfect girl, and I mean, why would you want to be Kim Kardashian? She spends her whole life sticking coke up her nose, living a futile life where she goes, I want that, and it's all given to her. But would you want that
Well,
life?
there's no value to that life.
Exactly. She walks past people every day and doesn't care. And I would feel so horrible if I'd done half the things that the famous people of this world are accountable of doing. And I'm not saying that don't have idols. Obviously have idols, and I do. I have amazing idols. My granny was one of the first people to fly an aeroplane.
Really?
She was 17 years old and she had her own aeroplane.
Wow.
That was her great-grandpa's, and she flew it. And that is the kind of person I look up to. And it's
That's
not only because
impressive.
she's family. She's an amazing woman. And I know a lady called Rachel who helps out here. She is a paramedic who works long hours through the night to help other people.
Yeah.
And yet she'll get a stick if something happens. If something was to go wrong, she'll get the stick. Yet she's waiting. And I mean, she has 2 kids. But she works every day, every night she works. And I think that those people are the people that we should be idolising, because they are amazing.
Well, I'm not sure about idolising, because I'm not sure most of them would want it.
No, yeah.
And if they did, that would be a problem in itself.
Yeah.
But I do think I speak a lot at work, and on, if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll see what I mean. I talk a lot about meaningful activity, which I define as something that the person defines as more important than themselves. And entertainment can never be more important than yourself.
I'd also like to state that when you look on social medias and you see these amazing videos of people going out and doing amazing things, and you sit there and go, oh, I wish I could do that, I wish I could do that, and you don't, that is just the worst, because you've seen that inspiration. And I'm not saying that you can do that exact thing. Unfortunately, we're not all millionaires and we can't afford to go skydiving off Mount Everest or any of that stuff. But you can go out and you can find amazing things. I know that I'm saying a lot about the scouting movement. The scouting movement does amazing things for young children. Young carers, if you have a sibling member of your family that has disabilities, please go to Young Carers, because they help me massively. They're a wonderful organisation. They take you away from your home. They take you away, they take you on trips, they let you go places, they give you a real sense of you being important. And as a child with a family member or any disability or having to grow up faster, it can be really hard to find that time to just chill and be a kid and just relax. And so this Young Carers does that for you. And it does it in amazing ways. It takes you out paintballing and it takes you to Cardiff to eat out of the massive buffet there, and wonderful things that you wouldn't be able to necessarily do if you didn't have that organisation there. And I think instead of getting angry at these organisations, we should be supporting them, because that's where our futures lie, in wonderful organisations that help us keep mentally stimulated. Indeed,
absolutely. Which brings us nicely to you doing that for other young people and being part of that. You've fairly nicely told me how you got into it. What was your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge was getting them to read the scripts. So we didn't necessarily have scripts, like written down scripts.
Yeah.
We have mental scripts.
Right.
And the hardest part was getting them not just to say it and memorise it, but to say it and mean those words. Because
so what sort of things are on the script?
So things like, hello, we're trying to help young adults living on the streets, dealing with mental health, like myself, and then tell them a little bit about you.
Yep.
Just a little, like, I lived on the streets for a number of amounts of time, and this has been my battle.
Yeah.
And we are trying today to get a donation from you. 50% of that donation will go to me to help with housing, to help with food, to help with other such things.
Yeah.
And the other 50% will go to kids that we have not found yet, but we are waiting. So, as in kids that are just coming off the street and need a hostel straight away.
Yeah.
And need food straight away, and need something straight away. Some of them will go into care because that's what they want to do. Some of them would rather get a flat and try it that way. And we've got to try and accommodate them. And so with that extra half the money that we use when we go out every day and collect, it means that we have something to fall back on to help others out.
So it's a self-perpetuating
Yeah, it was set up
organisation.
by young people who started out on the streets homeless. The guy who started its name, I believe, was Dean. And he was homeless. He ended up going inside. He came out of prison and he just said, I don't want to do this anymore. And so he used the small amount of money I think he saved up inside, and he started this CIC. He then went round and got a load of his friends who were homeless or doing things that they didn't really want to be doing in life, and helped them out. We had a number of children that have gone into universities, which is shocking because the amount of children that go off the street into university is minimum.
Yeah.
And so I think in 1 year we got about 7 children into university.
In 1 year?
Yeah, and so it was just great. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's wonderful because it gives you a sense of you actually being able to get them to do anything they want. Because you can say you can do anything you want, and it means that then they're like, oh, can I go to university? I'm afraid we haven't got the funds. Or you can say, I want to go to college, I really want to, do something with that. Sorry, we haven't got that. And other things we did is we went around local businesses and asked them if they'd be willing to do apprenticeships. So we could then get these kids into an apprenticeship, and it was less of an organisation rather than a group of close friends helping the city. And so it was an amazing thing because we would, if one of the businesses would ring us up and say, look, he hasn't turned up, we would go around the house with a frying pan, bang, 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 get up, get to work, go on, and so...
Did you have to do that a lot?
Yeah, once in a while, even for my own boss once. I went over, everybody was standing outside the office, and I was like, right, so I had to get a taxi to his house and drag him by the ear out of bed, and his mum helped me.
Excellent.
So...
You must be Dean, the guy that started it.
No, Dean actually works in Bristol, so he then made it over to Cardiff, and basically it was a second group of young kids that were like, we like what he's doing, we're going to do that as well. So Jordan is the boy that did it, and it was all on his back, Cardiff branch. Everything that happened was on his back. He's an amazing young guy. He's a bit silly, but I love him to bits, and he always had the heart for everybody, no matter what you had done, no matter where you'd been, inside, outside, what drugs you'd taken, it didn't matter to him. As long as you were honest and as long as you really tried, he would help you out. And that was the amazing thing, is that we, as I say, we're all like family. And so there was no hatred among each other when one of us would relapse, because I myself haven't been a heavy drug user, but I do know people that have. And it's so hard. It's so hard when everybody around you is doing the same thing and is, doing it and then going, oh, this is amazing, if this is great, you should be on this. And you're sat there with your mind going, do it. And you're trying to fight it, but then you sit there and you go, well, everybody else is doing it. What's the point of me stopping? And then that's what makes you fall back. And I wish that, I don't know, prisons or rehab centres would help people more by stopping putting the same groups of people together again. Because what we need to do is, if you have a drug and you really want to get off your drug addiction, go away from the people that you know. Go find somewhere new, make a start new, because you will never get clean with the people around you coming over your house every day. Hey man, hey, want some of this, want some of that,
So, we mentioned briefly about stigma, and you've talked about the stigma that some of your kids faced before you met them. What about the stigma that your organisation faced, was that difficult to overcome?
It was really difficult because you would obviously get worried people who are civilians who would be worrying that we would be in any way robbing them or taking their money for bad causes. I know that there is a lot of dishonest charity collectors. I know that there is one in Cardiff where they were like us. We thought they were like us. It was brilliant. It was young people going out collecting. Turned out they were taking their boxes back to the front room, smashing them open and then splitting the money between them and doing that every day. And it was horrible. And we had some of our own lot do that. And unfortunately at that point you have to fire them. Because and it's so hard for us because we have given these, or attempted to give these people so much out of ourselves. And it may sound selfish, but every day I would get up at about 7 o'clock in the morning, I'd be in for work, I'd get back at 11, I had no personal time. Yeah. But every day I would go and work and I would try and make these people's life. And when you see them succeed, it's the most amazing thing in the world. But when you see them do things that are beyond stupid and you're there like, what are you doing? You've been told about this, you know that this is going to mean that you're going to go back on the streets. And they just ignore you. And it's a heart-wrenching thing, because they're all like your own kids. And, well, no, they're all independent people, which is hard when you watch them make independent decisions, which is their right to do, but when...
Yeah, but emotionally, they're like your own kids.
Exactly. Yeah, and it can be really hard because you get really young, scared kids come in and then they go out and they're amazing, and then you get these angry, angsty kids come in and you calm them down and you help them to understand what anger is and how it affects you, and and so I think that it's so hard when you see them go back to the old ways when they've been sat telling you for so long that it's been great, it's been wonderful, they feel like they've got themselves again, they feel like they know who they are again. And then it's one relapse, and that's all it takes, and it's nuts. But I really try to promote to people that this isn't your face, and when you take off your makeup and you're actually happy and you feel confident, that is you. And obviously, when you get in a relationship, you'll learn. My boyfriend loves it when I don't wear makeup. He says he can actually see the real me. And as a person that is hiding yourself, you don't see that because you've had to look at yourself every day for every year and you've noticed every little imperfection you can find. And so listening to people around you tell you that you are pretty, you are gorgeous, you are amazing, needs to be less of a, no I'm not, oh no I'm not, no. Because people don't take compliments anymore, which is a shame, because some people deserve all the compliments in the world.
It is. It's a difficult skill, taking a compliment. And you know, the hardest words in the world sometimes are really, thank you.
Or just saying sorry.
Yeah.
And that is one I've met so many times, is, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, I remember we had these booklet things and the kids found that they could flick them like beer mats across the room.
Okay.
It's my pet hate. And I grabbed one of them as they flew across the room and I was like, right, who threw that? And I went over to him, what'd you say? And he was like, I'm not saying anything. And I was like, you're not saying anything, are you? You're going to play this out like a big man, are you? What do you say? And he said, oh, I'm sorry. I said, why don't you just say I'm sorry? It's not a bad word. You've done something that you didn't mean to do. You didn't mean to throw it at my head. If you had that good aim, then I don't think that, you know, you need to, like, realise you've done something wrong and realise that it's not a bad thing you've done something wrong. We make mistakes all the time. We're human. It's absolutely what we do. And being able to just say, I'm sorry, is an amazing thing to do. And
but that involves giving yourself permission to be fallible.
Yeah.
Which means giving yourself permission to be weak in some people's heads.
Yeah, and that's
and
the
I guess that was a big thing with the kids you were working with on the street. They have to be infallible because they have to be strong.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people like to put it to the back of their heads, the violence that you see on the streets. And I'm not at all big, and I'm not at all rough, but I will stand up when somebody hurts one of my group. And I remember a number of occasions that such things have happened. One time we were at a football game. It was the football league in Cardiff, and we were out collecting, and some guy slapped this girl across the arse, one of my workers. I can't remember, grabbed her, or, yeah, and I ran over and I pushed her, I said, you bloody well go away from me, you know, and that's something you have to face. But then it gets even worse to the point where you end up going into these places and you see flash fights. The flash fights can be the scariest thing in the world, because a flash fight almost always will contain a weapon, something quick, something slicey. I mean, I've been stabbed in the hand before, I've been stabbed with knitting needles, and it's something that the people who live in places where they don't deal with homeless, they don't deal with... And it's not just homeless, because that is the horriblest thing. It's all blamed on the homeless. It's normally blamed on the drug dealers that are dealing to these people and causing the violence. And so I grew up all around drug dealers. It's what I did. I grew up around drug dealers. I've grown up around drugs. And unfortunately that was just my... And it was nothing to do with the way my mum brought me up. It was nothing to do with that. My mum brought me up amazingly. I love my mum to pieces. She's an amazing, inspirational woman. But the world is dangerous. And these kids, on an often basis, would have knuckle dusters on them. They'd have knives, sheaths. They'd have little bits of card that they'd sharpen so they can just slice like that. You have multiple weapons that these kids are making. And they're kids. But they need to make them, because otherwise they will be beaten the blood out.
I understand that. But that's why inside I'm cringing, because these are little kids.
Exactly. It's so hard for people to accept and to understand, and people don't want to. They don't want to accept that I've met 13-year-olds that know how to make little knives out of a razor blade and a toothbrush. And I know kids that have stabbed other kids over small things like nicking a chocolate bar. But unfortunately, this is the way they're living, because if they don't do that, it will happen to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you can blame the ones that you bring in, you can blame the kids that you arrest, but unfortunately it's all coming from this anger that we live in. It's hard.
You seem so damn passionate about what you do. But that's a good thing. We started losing light, I think.
I was going to say, yeah. I think it might be. It's like, what is our fascination with hurting each other?